In this section, we're going to be implementing the client-side code for our course list page. So we're going to start by creating a link in our header. Now, unlike before, we're not going to be creating a link inside the login section. We're actually going to create the link up in the top left. So we'll need to go to our index.jade file. I want to put the link to the courses right here next to the link to the home page. So I'll just copy that and paste in a new section and call it courses. And I'll set the URL to be courses. Now that I've got the link in the header, we'll create a route in our app file. So I'll come down here and create that new route by copying this one and set the URL to courses. And for the template, I don't want to pull it out of the account directory because the course list has nothing to do with accounts. So I'm going to create a new area called courses, and I'll make the partial be course list. Now this is a public page that doesn't require login, so I'm going to get rid of the resolve and then change the controller. And now that the route is complete, we'll create the partial for it. So I'll need to start by creating a directory for that new area. And inside of here, I'll create my partial file. And as always, we'll start with a container. And my course list is just going to be a simple table of data. So I'll create a table, and we'll give it a few styles to make it look nice. And we'll create our head. We'll have two columns, a title and a publish date. And for the body, we'll create a series of rows, and we'll have two cells within that, the title and the publish date. We'll format that as a date. Okay, now our partial is complete, so let's create our controller. And initially all I want to do is get a list of the courses so that I can bind to that. So what I'm going to need is a resource that I can query in order to get the list of courses. And of course I got to add that to my dependencies. And now I'll have to go and create that resource. And we'll create this resource just like we created the user resource. And our URL will be API courses, and then the ID, and then we'll set what the ID is. And we'll add another operation for updating using the put verb. And then we just return that resource, and we're done. And now I need to add both this controller and the resource file to the scripts. And with all that put into place, we can go ahead and test out the client code. So go to the browser and refresh the page. And you can see I've got the console open. So I'm going to click on the courses link. And you can see that we're getting this error in resource configuration. It expected the response to contain an array, but it got an object. So let's figure out exactly what's going on. We'll go down to the network tab and we'll click on the courses call. And remember, this is supposed to be getting back a JSON object, but instead it's actually giving back HTML. Why is that? Well, since we haven't created the route on the server side, we're getting the default route, which returns the main page. Now looking at our headers, we can see that what we're trying to access is /API/courses. Now anytime a user requests anything inside of our API, we know they're looking for JSON and don't need to get to our default route. So in this case, what we'd actually like to do is return a 404. That way, whenever we request an API route that doesn't exist, we'll get a 404 back that tells us exactly what the problem is. So let's go back to our code, and we'll go to the routes file. And down here, right before that default route, and since I want this route to respond to every verb and not just GET requests, I'm going to use app.all and set the URL to API and then asterisk. And I'll just send back a 404. And let's save those changes and go back to the browser and refresh and see what we get. Alright, you can see the courses is now giving us a 404, and if we go to the console, we're just seeing the 404 and not that other misleading error. Now, one other thing that you may have noticed is that our header all of a sudden got really big. The reason for that is because of an accidental change inside of my Jade template. Let's go back to the code. We'll go back to our index page. And you can see right in here that this div is now lined up on the same level as this container. Its correct location is right here, at this level underneath this navbar collapse. But because of the automatic reformatting, when I pasted in the LI and the A tag, WebStorm outdented it 2 levels. So if I fix this and we go back to the page and refresh, then all of a sudden our header goes back into place. So this is something to be careful of. It's very easy to make mistakes like this with your Jade templates, and the results can be rather confusing. Another thing that you may notice is that the column headers are really squished up against the navigational header. This is because the padding for the body is a little off from the actual height of the header. So I'm going to fix that as well by going back into our code and going to my site stylus file. And the padding is set to 61 pixels. Let's go back to the browser and check and see what the height of that header actually is. I'll use the inspect element, grab this, and I'll get the entire nav bar. Looking at computed, I can see that it's 68.5. So I'm going to go back here and set this to 69 pixels. And if I save that change and refresh the browser, now we're getting a reasonable amount of padding. And now we're finished implementing the client code and we can move on to the server.